Okay, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Shawn Kumagai, and my background is in second language acquisition for the Department of Defense. For the past 8 years, I've worked in various capacities, including classroom instructor, supervisor, and also course developer for various stakeholders. So when I decided to do my capstone project, I wanted to do it on something that I was really familiar with back when I was working as a military language instructor. One of the things that we did was provide advisement. So my client is the Center for Information Dominance Unit, Monterey, which at DLI there are service units. So this is the Navy Unit Lieutenant Command. And they employ military language instructors who advise their Navy students go through the various programs at DLI. Now DLI has 25 different languages they teach. So they really go all across the gamut. And these military language instructors are previous or current linguists who have previously gone through the program. So they have that kind of life experience. So I just wanted to say from the very start that this is a human performance technology solution. So it's going to be very different from the other projects that you see here, which were instructional interventions. And that'll be evident here as we go through this. So this is the problem statement. So these MOIs at the client's site, they wanted to be able to conduct standardized, documented advisements for their students, and they had no formalized training program. Now, the main issue here was that their MOIs are overworked and underpaid, so they didn't really have the luxury of going through a training program. And now, these are also active duty people, so they're rotating through every 2 to 4 years. So you have a high rate of turnover, and every time you bring them in, you need to kind of inject these skills. So that's why I decided to go with a human performance technology solution. So you'll see here that the project objectives are a lot different than what you would normally see in an instructional intervention. You have things like save time, standardization, protect personal information, maximize time, place, utility. And basically what that means is because they're so crunched for time, they can't sit down and necessarily do things in one shot. So they want to be able to do it from home, they want to be able to do it from the schoolhouse or from the work center. So that presented some issues because you need to allow for retrieval of interaction data if you're going to split the process up. So that's why you'll see that I went with a solution that is not using something like a rapid prototyping tool like Captivate. And we'll talk a little bit more about this as we get into kind of the back-end side of things. So what I went for is an electronic performance support system. And for those of you in my cohort, it's been a year since you've heard of that, I'll just give you a reminder. This is a digital aid used in the workplace to support or scaffold a process, so a work process. So scaffolding is really what makes something an EPSS. If you take the scaffolding out, you just have an information system. So the idea is that you are scaffolding or supporting the process as needed, and that you can take that away when you don't need it anymore. So I had 3 phases: interview, advisement, and documentation. This was kind of like a 3-step process. And the product that I developed, or the graphical user interface, kind of followed that model. So there's a couple implications of this unique problem statement. I wanted to explore the benefits of using a performance aid vice training, because typically in the Department of Defense, if there's a gap, we throw training at it. So what I wanted to see was if we don't necessarily even train these people at all, they're laymen, and then we give them this tool, will they be able to perform an advisement? I wanted to establish a framework for a holistic advisement process. A lot of times when people get advisement, it's very narrow in focus. So it'll just focus on maybe 1 or 2 aspects of the academic process that the student is having an issue with. But I wanted to look at things like life skills and how they were adjusting to military life and things like that as well. And then I wanted to provide a working prototype for potential further development. So what I used is a modified ISD design model, and what I mean by that is that it was iterative. So it has the ADDIE, that we're used to in ISD, but you're doing this continuously through iterations of product development. And then you inject considerations for delivery of technology. And I took that from this Birkenhog, Archibald, and Burtwhistle, which they are the Advanced Diagnostics Lab. They put out a paper about mobile learning development. So I thought that was a pretty interesting concept. And like I said before, you know, I started off trying to cram a square peg through a round hole and use a rapid prototyping method. But because of the data storage element that I needed to do, that wasn't working. So what I ended up with was a web-based technology solution. So I'm just going to jam through this really quickly because I wanted to show the product. So the framework was a web-based technology solution. It used HTML5, CSS styling, and then in the back end of things, it used MySQL and PHP scripting to handle the storage of information and presentation of some of the elements. So this is a little daunting, but this will all be available on the webpage, so you can pull it up and look at it in more detail. The main things are, this is your forward-facing interface. This is your database that happens on the web server side of things. And then this was the output that also had to be processed and handled on the web server side of things. So this is what it came up with. And I'll just real quickly pull that up. I did design it for iPad, was the main interface. So I wanted, that was kind of consideration, was the dimensions. But you know, you could go in here and retrieve student data, or you could just go in here and then as you go through and the student answers the questions or you guide them through the questions, it presents new questions. And then as they go through to the interview results, it would sort and present what issues the student might have. And then based on that, they could go on to the advisement and then select prescriptions that they felt targeted that student's particular deficiencies. Go on to the document. If they wanted to, they could edit this text. Go here, and it automatically populates to a PDF form. So I did use I only did a formative evaluation on this because it's not an instructional intervention and there's just not enough time to really test how it would impact the workplace in one semester. But I did find that there were some critical issues. So in between my two iterations, I conducted this face-to-face evaluation, identified those issues, and did updates as I went through the iterations. So I just wanted to point out that I had three major challenges. The learning curve, and I would say for the incoming cohort, if you're going to do an HTML project, HTML-based project, start now. I really had to depend on a lot of external expertise. Thankfully, we received Dr. Lara right when I needed him, and I took his course, and it really got me going. But I spent quite a few trips to his office, kind of working through things. But I also had to lean on external expertise from some of my friends and experts in various areas such as graphic design and web design. And system setup. Fortunately, we have support staff here, but that was another aspect, is setting everything up on the web server side of things. That's something that's kind of beyond the scope of this, but luckily we have support staff that help, install some of the things that I needed on the server side and whatnot. So this is not a very generalizable project, but I think it could be. I had a very specific target audience, but as far as general advisement and supporting that process, I think it could be applied to other areas. And I have a lot of ideas for how this could be further developed. Now, this is just a working prototype, a proof of concept, if you will. So it could really be fleshed out more and developed into a full product that they could use at the client side or even DLI at large. These are my references if anyone's interested in reading more about that. Any questions? Yes?
How long is your system? I did that just as a proof. storing the data for? Like, if somebody were to come back for the advanced course, could it analyze and pull it up and say, oh, the basic courses is what you struggled with?
So, part of the thing was there is no real user management system here, and that was partially because the client didn't want it. They don't want you to store personal identifiable information on any system. Now, it could be very easily adapted to have a user management system. So what I did was everything is given a identification code, and the only thing that's stored is interaction data. So that way you can recall that interaction data at a later time. So what happens is the person inputs an email and it sends them an email with that code. And they can go back at any time and put that code in and pull that interaction data. It doesn't have any user data. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions?
Great. Excellent.